The lecture on Serviceology will start. Today's theme is Basic Criteria of Service and CSM. Here, CSM stands for Customer Satisfaction Model. So, let's get started. First, the classic but most basic criteria of service are described here. They are service quality and customer value. So far, many criteria of service have been studied and proposed. To understand these, it is useful to know the classic but basic expressions of service. These are qualitative, and it is difficult to define quantitative expressions or levels. Nevertheless, these criteria are useful for designing good services. The first criterion is the service quality. This is the most important indicator to consider in serviceology. The service quality is expressed as the difference between perceived services and expected services in advance by a customer. According to this, the service quality would depend on the subjectivity of the customer, since each customer has different desires and expectations. Please refer to this formula. The left-hand side represents the service quality. The perceived service on the right-hand side is the customer's perception of the provided service. It is a comprehensive evaluation that combines the customer's 5 senses as human beings, comparison with the customer's criteria, and the customer's psychology. The expected service on the right-hand side is expressed as the degree of expectation a customer has about a service before receiving it. In other words, it is a prior expectation. Please note that this formula is not mathematically calculable, but is a conceptual expression and useful for qualitative evaluation. First of all, to feel for what the service is, a prologue will be shown. Services are now the main economic activity in developed countries around the world. The service sector employs more than half of the workers in developed countries. However, if we do not know the definition of services, we will not be able to see which sectors offer the best business opportunities. For example, there are service robots in the health and welfare industry. In 1998, the University of Virginia estimated that the use of 6 hospital service robots, for transport, medical record information, monitoring, guiding, etc., in medium and large hospitals would save $600,000 over 5 years. If robots could be used to prepare medications, human error would be eliminated, and pharmacists and hospital staff would be able to spend more time and energy on patients. The service industry accounts for approximately 70% of Japan's GDP and 75% of the country's employees, making it a significant part of the Japanese economy. Japan has been trying to make service studies one of the important industrial backbones of the country. Here, paragraph numbers 1 and 2 are quoted from Gronruse's book, Service Management and Marketing. The second criterion is the customer value. Customer value is expressed as the ratio of service quality to the service acquisition cost, with higher values being more desirable, as shown in the formula. Service quality in the numerator has already been explained. Service acquisition cost in the denominator includes the price of the service and the cost of use. Cost of use refers to the effort required to obtain the service. What this formula means is that to increase customer value, service acquisition costs must be reduced. And vice versa. Let's consider how service acquisition costs relate to customer value. Now, consider the service at an upscale restaurant. Service acquisition costs in this case would include dressing up, makeup, and the travel cost to ensure that you are well dressed when you go to the restaurant. Using these is the cost of use. Of course, using these will also require money. The sum of these is the service acquisition cost. In this case, the service acquisition cost, which is in the denominator of the fraction, will be high. Therefore, in order to increase customer value, the service quality in the numerator of the fraction must be increased. Next, consider the service at a fast food restaurant. Service acquisition costs in this case would include casual clothing, easy to get in, short staying time, and so on. So, in fast food restaurants, the service acquisition cost is relatively low. Therefore, in order to increase customer value, it is permissible to design service quality relatively low. From the above, this way of thinking provides a useful guideline for increasing customer value. Here is off the subject, but two other criteria will be shown. Here is the service profitability. As defined in the formula, the service profitability is easy to understand. This formula is a qualitative expression and may sometimes represent psychology. Take a look at the cost to provider on the right-hand side of the formula. We can see examples of the cost to provider, such as advertising costs, costs related to hiring, training, and dressing employees, facility maintenance, and advertising costs. It will be easy for you to understand them. Please note that the cost to the provider is different from the service acquisition cost described in service quality. The service acquisition cost is for the user. On the other hand, the cost to the provider is related to service management in general. And, focusing only on improving service profitability and focusing too much on reducing the cost to provider may reduce customer value over time. For example, significantly reducing capital investment or employee quality to reduce the cost of providing service will decrease customer value over time. The another criteria is the customer lifetime value. In the service business, loyal customers or repeat customers are considered to be the source of revenue, and the following formula is used to evaluate the value generated from them. Margin in the numerator refers to the value margin. Repeated usage in the numerator is the number of times a customer receives the service, and investment in the denominator is the cost required to design and operate the service. For many services, increasing the number of repeat uses is considered in the short term, and effective management of investments is taken into account in the long term. The next topic is about the customer satisfaction model. A customer satisfaction model is a structured approach or framework to analyze, measure, and improve customer satisfaction. The model is conceptual and cannot be calculated quantitatively. However, it's one of the most effective tools to measure customer satisfaction levels and take steps to improve them. The model helps companies measure how satisfied their customers are with their products, services, or overall performance. Here, we introduce the Oliver model, a classic but simple customer satisfaction model that is often referred to. This model is also known as the expectation disconfirmation theory. The notations, E and P, in the diagram respectively, correspond to the expected service and perceived service of the service quality mentioned earlier. In the Oliver model, it is said that the difference between the E and the P is influenced by the customer's values and psychology, and this is represented by the disconfirmation of beliefs in the diagram. Comparing the disconfirmation of beliefs with P produces satisfaction in the diagram. For more details on this model, please see the references shown in this page. Here, we will explain the difference between satisfaction in this model and the service quality explained earlier. Satisfaction is influenced by the values and psychology of each individual. On the other hand, service quality is evaluated according to certain standards and can be said to be more objective than satisfaction. However, both are conceptual representations and may be useful for the conceptual design of a service, but for actual service design, further objective indicators are required. Next, the Kano model will be described, developed by Professor Kano in Japan in the 1980s. This model takes into account the subjective satisfaction of customers. It is highly dependent on the experience, expectations, and values of each individual customer. For example, the figure on the right shows that for a certain dish, the person on the left likes it, the person in the middle dislikes it, and the person on the right is unsure and undecided, respectively depend on each subjective satisfaction. This explains the subjective satisfaction of each individual customers. The Kano model is characterized by its two-dimensional representation of objective and subjective evaluations. Objective evaluation is represented by the degree of implementation for quality elements, and on the horizontal axis of the graph. Subjective evaluation is represented by customer satisfaction, and on the vertical axis of the graph. Under this, the Kano model is classified into 5 categories from A to E. Model A is called the must-be quality, in which quality elements are taken for granted when they are satisfied, but dissatisfaction occurs when they are not satisfied. As shown in Graph A, dissatisfaction is not resolved until the quality elements are completely satisfied. Model B is called one-dimensional quality, in which quality elements cause satisfaction when they are satisfied, and dissatisfaction when they are not satisfied. As shown in Graph B, it shows a linear relationship. Mode C is called attractive quality, in which quality elements cause satisfaction when they are satisfied, but are perceived as acceptable even if they are not satisfied. As shown in Graph C, it has the characteristic of responding sensitively to the satisfaction of quality elements. Model D is called indifferent quality, in which unsatisfaction of quality elements does not affect satisfaction. As shown in Graph D, it represents this. Model E is called reverse quality, in which satisfaction causes dissatisfaction, and unsatisfaction causes satisfaction. This is difficult to represent graphically, so it is not drawn on a graph. Here, examples of the Kano model will be shown. Examples for must-be quality are good hygienic food in restaurants or accurate train schedules. This can be seen in Japan. These services have the characteristics of the curve A. Examples for one-dimensional quality are cashier waiting times, or smartphone battery life, and so on. These services have the characteristics of the curve B. Examples for attractive quality are surprise gift, or providing special offers and compensations to customers, and so on. These services have the characteristics of the curve C. Note that if it is repeated many times, customers will get used to it and it will become must-be quality or one-dimensional quality. Examples for indifferent quality are overly polite service at a call center, or unused functions on a TV controller, and so on. These services have the characteristics of the region D. Examples for reverse quality are BGM that a customer doesn't like, or overly complicated input forms on a web, and so on. These services could not be shown on the graph. Next, American Customer Satisfaction Index will be explained. This is the leading national indicator of customer satisfaction with goods and services in the U.S. economy. The model shown in the figure is a set of causal equations that link perceived quality, perceived value, and customer expectations to customer satisfaction. and it is linked, in turn, to its consequences in terms of customer complaints and customer loyalty. For further explanation, please refer to the references listed below. We would discuss some thoughts on the customer satisfaction model. Olive, Kano, and ACSI model are only qualitative expressions and cannot be calculated quantitatively. However, they can be a powerful guideline when designing services. Please note that human perception is greatly influenced by the psychology and environment in which the service is received, so the properties of these models do not always hold true. It is also important to know that complete reproducibility cannot be expected. This can also be seen from the heterogeneity that is a characteristic of service, as already mentioned. Thank you for watching. This lecture ends here. Please watch for the next lecture. The URL for the next lecture is listed in the description box of the opening lecture, whose URL is in this description box. If you like this lecture, please subscribe to my channel.